Judas's remorse. Morning broke over the city of Jerusalem, the golden light creeping across its rooftops, unable to dispel the darkness of the events unfolding within. The chief priests and elders, faces grim with determination, convened in secret chambers. Their decision had been made. The man who had challenged their authority, who had stirred the hearts of the people, must die. Jesus was bound tightly, his hands secured with coarse ropes, and led through the cobbled streets. Dust swirled around his feet as they delivered him to the Roman governor, Pontius Pilate, their whispered schemes now in motion. Far from the clamor of the city's early awakening, Judas Iscariot wandered aimlessly, consumed by guilt. The 30 silver coins, once so heavy in his hands, now seemed unbearable. His betrayal played over and over in his mind. The kiss in the garden, the whispered words exchanged in shadow, and the look on Jesus' face, the look of sorrow, not anger, that haunted him most. Judas clutched the coins tightly as he stumbled toward the temple. His breathing was ragged, his thoughts a whirlwind of regret. When he reached the entrance, the solemnity of the sacred place did little to calm the storm inside him. He pushed his way in, his voice shaking as he confronted the chief priests and elders. "I have sinned by betraying innocent blood," he declared, the words tumbling out of him like a confession torn from his very soul. He held the coins out to them, his hands trembling. But their expressions remained cold, their indifference cutting deeper than any weapon. "What is that to us?" one of them replied, their voice sharp and dismissive. "See to that yourself." Judas's hands fell, the coins slipping through his fingers and clinking onto the stone floor of the temple. The sound echoed in the chamber, like the toll of a bell marking his fate. His gaze lingered on the scattered silver for a moment before he turned and fled, unable to bear their rejection or the weight of his own guilt. He wandered the outskirts of the city, his steps aimless and heavy. The sun climbed higher in the sky, its light mercilessly illuminating the barren landscape he now found himself in. Every breath felt labored, every heartbeat a painful reminder of what he had done. His thoughts were a cacophony of anguish. He had betrayed the man who had shown him love, the man who had called him friend. Judas found himself beneath a solitary tree, its gnarled branches stretching skyward like accusing fingers. The world around him was eerily silent, as though holding its breath in anticipation. He reached into his pocket, but it was empty. The 30 pieces of silver were gone, yet their weight still bore down on him as if they had sunk into his soul. Tears streamed down his face as he tied a rope to the branch, his hands trembling as they worked. "Forgive me," he whispered into the silence, though he doubted forgiveness could ever reach him. The act was quick, his body suspended in the stillness of the desolate field. Far away, the chief priests gathered the scattered silver from the temple floor. Though their hearts were hardened, they debated what to do with the money. "It is not lawful to put them into the temple treasury," one of them said. "It is the price of blood." After conferring together, they decided to purchase the potter's field, a plot of land that would become a burial place for strangers. And so, the field became known as the Field of Blood, its name a testament to betrayal and remorse, forever tied to the man who had thrown the coins away in an act of despair. Yet even in this, the prophecy of Jeremiah was fulfilled. "And they took the 30 pieces of silver, the price of the one whose price had been set by the sons of Israel, and they gave them for the potter's field, as the Lord directed me." The city continued to move with its morning rhythm, but for Judas, the sun had set, his life claimed by the weight of his choices. The field remained, a silent witness to the cost of betrayal. Jesus before Pilate. The chamber of Pontius Pilate, the Roman governor, was bathed in the pale light of early morning. The walls, usually a symbol of authority and power, now felt oppressive, as if they too bore witness to the gravity of the moment. Jesus stood before Pilate, calm and composed despite the storm swirling around him. His hands, bound tightly with rough cords, bore the marks of the night's agony. Pilate, seated on the governor's judgment seat, regarded Jesus with a mixture of curiosity and unease. "Are you the king of the Jews?" Pilate questioned, his voice firm yet carrying a note of genuine inquiry. He studied the man before him, seeking an understanding that eluded him. Jesus met his gaze, his voice steady and unshaken as he replied, "It is as you say." Pilate frowned, his thoughts clouded by the accusations brought against this man. The chief priests and elders stood nearby, their voices a cacophony of accusations and condemnations. They gestured wildly, their faces twisted with anger and determination. Yet through it all, Jesus remained silent. Pilate leaned forward, his frustration evident. "Do you not hear how many things they testify against you?" he demanded, his voice rising. But Jesus did not answer, not a single word. Pilate's brow furrowed further, his amazement growing. This was no ordinary man. There was a strength in his silence that Pilate could not comprehend. He glanced at the seething crowd gathering outside, their shouts growing louder by the minute. As the custom during the feast, Pilate knew he could release one prisoner to the people, a gesture meant to placate and win their favor. He saw an opportunity, a way to absolve himself of this troubling situation. At that moment, a notorious prisoner named Barabbas was being held, a man known for insurrection and violence. Pilate called for the crowd to gather, their voices a surging tide of unrest. "Whom do you want me to release for you? Barabbas or Jesus who is called Christ?" Pilate called out, his voice echoing over the tumult. Deep down, he understood that the chief priests had handed Jesus over out of envy, their jealousy thinly veiled by the facade of justice. As he awaited their response, a messenger arrived, delivering a note from Pilate's wife. Her words carried an urgency that unsettled him further. "Have nothing to do with that righteous man, for last night I suffered greatly in a dream because of him." Pilate's unease deepened, the weight of the decision pressing heavily upon him. But the chief priests and elders moved swiftly, weaving through the crowd like venomous serpents. They whispered and persuaded, their words fueling the anger of the masses. The people's shouts soon became unified, their voices a rising crescendo. "Barabbas!" they cried out, their fists raised. "Release Barabbas!" Pilate's heart sank as he watched the crowd, their faces contorted with anger. He raised his hands, attempting to reason with them. "Then what shall I do with Jesus who is called Christ?" he asked, his voice carrying both frustration and a plea for sanity. "Crucify him!" The roar of the crowd was deafening, their chant repeated with a savage fervor. "Crucify him!" Pilate's voice rose above the chaos, his exasperation plain. "Why? What evil has he done?" he demanded. But reason could not pierce the mob's fury. Their cries only grew louder, drowning out all else. "Crucify him!" Pilate's chest tightened as he realized the situation was slipping beyond his control. The crowd was on the brink of riot, their rage boiling over. He looked down at the man standing before him, a man whose presence seemed to emanate peace even in the face of such hatred. Pilate sighed heavily, his shoulders sagging under the weight of his decision. Calling for water, Pilate stood before the crowd. As the basin was brought to him, he dipped his hands into the water, the coolness of it doing little to ease his turmoil. He raised his hands and declared, "I am innocent of this man's blood. See to that yourselves." His words were both an abdication of responsibility and an admission of defeat. The crowd responded with chilling unity, their voices cold and resolute. "His blood shall be on us and on our children," they cried, their anger unrelenting. Reluctantly, Pilate ordered for Barabbas to be released, the chains around the notorious criminal clinking as they fell to the ground. But the grim task was not yet complete. He turned back to the guards and gave the final order. Jesus was to be scourged and handed over for crucifixion. Pilate sat heavily on his seat, the weight of the morning bearing down on him. The chants of the crowd still rang in his ears as Jesus was led away, his back soon to bear the brutal lash. Though Pilate had washed his hands, the stain of his decision would linger, a reminder of the day justice gave way to the will of an angry mob. Jesus is mocked. The soldiers of the governor dragged Jesus into the praetorium, their heavy boots echoing off the stone floors. The room was vast, cold, and filled with the murmurs and jeers of the Roman cohort that gathered around him. A sense of mockery hung thick in the air, the soldiers treating this moment not as solemn, but as sport. Their eyes gleamed with cruel anticipation, their voices rising in harsh laughter. They stripped Jesus of his garments, his bruised and bloodied body exposed to the mocking stares of the gathered men. Someone retrieved a scarlet robe, the deep red fabric meant to mimic a royal garment. They threw it over his shoulders with a dramatic flourish, their mockery dripping with malice. "Let's crown the king," one of them sneered, holding up a cruel crown they had fashioned. It was made of thorns, each sharp point twisted together into a vicious circle. The soldiers laughed as they placed it on his head, the thorns pressing into his flesh. Blood began to drip down his face, the crimson trails stark against his pallid skin. A reed was shoved into his hand, a mock scepter for this so-called king of the Jews. Then the mocking began in earnest. The soldiers knelt before him, their actions exaggerated and taunting. "Hail, King of the Jews!" they jeered, their voices filled with disdain. Their words were not reverent but venomous, each syllable a slap in the face of the one they mocked. As they laughed and sneered, their mockery turned to violence. They spat on him, their contempt manifest in the degrading act. One soldier grabbed the reed from his hand and used it as a weapon, striking him on the head. Each blow drove the thorns deeper, the pain unimaginable, yet Jesus endured in silence. Finally, their cruel entertainment reached its conclusion. They ripped the scarlet robe from his shoulders, the fabric sticking to his wounds and reopening them as it was pulled away. They dressed him in his own garments again, the mockery discarded now that its purpose had been served. The soldiers grabbed him roughly, dragging him out of the praetorium to begin the walk to Golgotha. The streets of Jerusalem were already teeming with people, the news of Jesus' condemnation spreading like wildfire. The crowd pressed in on every side, their faces twisted with anger and scorn. Shouts filled the air, shouts of condemnation, hatred, and mockery. The frenzy of the mob was palpable, their collective rage a storm that surged around him. Jesus was forced to carry the heavy wooden cross through the streets, its weight pressing against his torn and battered body. His steps were slow, each one a struggle, but the crowd showed no mercy. They shouted insults, their words cutting deeper than the lashes that had torn his flesh. Some threw stones or struck him as he passed, their anger boiling over in acts of cruelty. But his strength began to falter, his body weakened beyond endurance. As he stumbled, the soldiers looked around, searching for someone to bear the weight of the cross. Their eyes fell on a man in the crowd, a man of Cyrene named Simon. Without ceremony or choice, the soldiers pressed Simon into service. "You carry it!" they barked, shoving him forward. Reluctantly, Simon stepped forward and took hold of the cross. The wood was heavy and coarse, digging into his shoulders as he struggled to lift it. The procession continued, the anger of the crowd unrelenting. Simon walked behind Jesus, his face etched with both fear and sorrow. He bore the weight of the cross, as the man before him bore the weight of the world's sin, each step drawing them closer to the place of ultimate sacrifice.